everyone. So I wanted to just come on here and talk a bit about my experience as someone who graduated from Oxford in 2022. The question I get asked most often is, how did I apply to Oxford? What are the tips and tricks to succeed with applying to Oxbridge? So I thought I'd come on here and make a brief video with my top tips and hacks that I've learned through my journey through sixth form and beyond. Stay tuned. I think it starts with having the dream, having a vision of going somewhere like Oxford. Dreaming that it is possible for you and dreaming that you are capable of it. That is where it starts. And for me, the person that gave me that vision was my mom. She actually showed me, she spotted my interest in English and the fact that my teachers and mentors were really supportive of me pursuing my passion in English. And she said, right, how can we take this to the maximum potential that it has? And we kind of worked together as a team to discover that Oxford was the #1 university for studying a subject like English. So that was around when I was 15, 16 years old, where I first started to see this as a vision for my life. And at the root of it all is a deep passion for your subject. This is not something that you can do because you want an Oxford degree or because you just want the prestige of going to Oxford. At the root of it all, it has to be a genuine academic passion and intellectual ambition. I also wanted to give a shout out to my dad because he's the reason why I could study English, and he never forced me to do medicine or engineering or one of those traditionally more lucrative subjects. He saw that I had a passion for this subject, and every step of the way, he was there with me. And I wanted to share an anecdote that really shows the kind of support that people need to get to a place like Oxford. So due to various challenges my family was facing when I was in sixth form, I almost didn't apply to Oxford. And at that point, my dad said to me, look, Shreya, if you don't apply to Oxford now, you will regret it for the rest of your life. And even if you get rejected, at least it's better to apply and know that you gave it a good go. And that really changed my mindset. And I decided to apply, and look, who would have thought I would be here today? So it's important really to gather that village of people around you who are willing to support you. And I agree, I acknowledge that I have had immense privilege because I've not only had the infrastructure and resources to educate myself, I've also had excellent teachers who knew and had the cultural capital to push me academically. If you're doing an essay subject, you will most likely have the opportunity to do a non-examination assessment, otherwise known as coursework. So this is an extremely valuable opportunity for stretching yourself once again academically and creating that portfolio of evidence that you can draw upon in your personal statement and interview. So for my coursework piece in English, I compared Middlemarch and Brick Lane by Monica Ali. So on one hand, Middlemarch was a 900-page dense Victorian novel that is not for the lighthearted, and I read that over the summer, making notes on language, structure, and form after each chapter. So by the time I got invited to interview, having mentioned this in my personal statement, I knew I could talk about this book like I knew it like the back of my hand. And that massively impressed the tutors in my interview. I'd also listened to podcasts like In Our Time, which are actually run by Oxford alumni and other academics, so I could actually practice articulating academic opinions. Because the style of intellectual discussion is very different to maybe just talking about books in a more informal way. Additionally, I did French, which is my second great passion, and I read L'étrangère by Albert Camus in French. This was something my tutor specifically said in interview was very impressive. And I think that for me, French was a genuine passion, and as soon as I had that coursework element, I thought, how can I show my ambition and passion combined through the kinds of texts that I'm looking at. The extended project qualification lets you do some extended research or produce a creative artifact on a niche subject that you're interested in. And this is heavily encouraged for anyone applying to Oxbridge. Why? Because it lets you show that you have gone above and beyond the curriculum and shown that initiative to explore a subject that is really close to your heart. My biggest advice, I chose to do a creative piece, so I did a 5,000 word short story about my experiences as growing up as a third culture kid, and I grounded that in post-colonial theory. So as you can see, plenty of opportunity to dig deep into those academic interests while being creative. So some of the highlights from this were doing a Yale open online course where I learned about the basics and theories of post-colonialism, and that is something that was university level that I on my own kind of picked up at A level. So the reason I'm saying this is because you've got to have those examples at the ready when you're applying for Oxford of showing where you actually pushed yourself beyond what was expected of you in school. The Oxford interview is a very specific kind of style of discussion, and you need to be prepared for that. So the first thing I would recommend, find the Oxford or Oxbridge alumni in your area. I went to a mock interviews event where we got feedback from Oxford alumni based on our mock interviews. And you have to be ready in the interview to talk about the books mentioned in your personal statement. For example, what I did is I created a Google Doc where I had the names of each of the books that I had mentioned in my personal statement. I had a table where I talked about, in my own words, what happens in the beginning, middle, and end of the book, so that I could comment on the structure. Additionally, I had some key themes, key quotations, potentially even some critical perspectives to help you see what kind of opinions people have voiced about the books. So that's, how I was able in the interview to meet each question I was asked. Don't be afraid to come across as earnest. If you are a little bit eccentric, a lot of gifted people are quite a little bit eccentric, and they are a little bit, they do stray off the beaten path, and sometimes you might find that your interests are deep and special and quite different from what would be conventional for a lot of young people. So if it's related to your subject, absolutely go ahead and share that interest, because the Oxford interview is absolutely the one place where you can do that. And lastly, I want to say, showcase your thinking out loud. So whatever you are thinking, it doesn't have to be the right answer. You just want to show that you are critically evaluating the question they have asked you. It's even fine to say that actually, after being interrogated on a topic, you have changed your mind, and you can explain why you've changed your mind. That's fine. I did that in my interview, and that just shows that you're thinking. Finally, I also want to talk about the written work sample. You will have to send in an analytical essay, which I believe it was about 2,000 to 3,000 words, and it's an example of the kind of analysis that you do for A-level. Again, here I am completely indebted to my teachers who read my work, and they gave me suggestions for how to elevate its academic content. So I looked at The Handmaid's Tale and the way that Offred's oppression is presented in the novel, particularly the representation of men and her position in relation to the men of the novel. I was really strong in the language analysis, and I was able to do the zooming in and looking at structure and form using high-level terminology. But the area where I needed a bit of support and enrichment from my teachers was considering the ways that I could incorporate a critical stance as well. So making sure that I had involved theories such as Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil, looking at the ways that second wave feminists had influenced Atwood and resulted in this very complex presentation of femininity and what it means to have equal rights in the novel. So what I'm trying to get at is that there has to be something in your written piece that is like a special ingredient that shows your extensive wider reading, and that you are not just someone who sits and analyzes text in a silo, but you are thinking about how to have a conversation with the different contexts of the text and the different ways that critics have approached the text. And not to mention, as much as you can, have a strong argument, because that is the one skill that you are going to be revisiting over and over again at Oxford. Make sure that you make a clear thesis that you argue for throughout the essay. Obviously, this is something that you have to do for all universities. And in the British system, not sure if all my viewers are familiar, you have to write one personal statement that goes to 5 universities, and one of those universities will be Oxford or Cambridge, whichever one you choose to apply to. So I think that the personal statement is that first screening, where you have to make a strong impression on the person that's reading your application. And for me, I wrote my personal statement keeping Oxford in mind. I did not write it for the other 4 universities, to be completely honest with you. So how did I do that? Well, I was thinking about what modules Oxford has. Oxford's degree in English is one that is really extensive and broad. It spans from Old English, as in Old English when it was like not even the same language as the one we speak today, 650 AD, all the way to the present day. So I needed to show that breadth, and I showed it by talking about how I had read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, how I had moved forward to reading Victorian novels like Middlemarch, how I had read in French absurdist texts like L'Étranger, and then all the way to the present, where I've been reading like contemporary novels that have post-colonial themes. So by showing that range, I was able to show my alignment to the Oxford course. Additionally, I had a lot of feedback. So once again, I showed my drafts to experienced teachers who were able to give me feedback and suggest how I can craft my personal statement so that it tells a story about my love of literature. And I'm not just saying I've always loved literature ever since I was a child, though that's true. I'm saying, well, actually, my particular niche in literature is looking at the connections across time, and evidence. My coursework, where I compared Middlemarch with Brick Lane, a really difficult comparison, and I did that by looking at the presentations of women in the Victorian era versus in the Bangladeshi community of Brick Lane. So that sort of thing can really be used as evidence of a very specific aim that you have for literary studies. The most important thing I would say is to not take the Oxford application process as a source of pressure. Don't take it as something that is forcing you to be a perfect student, but rather as an opportunity to become who you always were and actually explore your potential to the fullest. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.